Spiritual questions answered. We almost called this spiritual questions discussed. I don't know if you guys knew that, but we almost changed it because, let's face it, we don't really answer things. We discuss things as it should be. You guys know how it goes by now. My name is Curtis Childs with the Swedenborg Foundation. Power team to my left. This is Cara Dom, New Century Edition Latin consultant. If you look over this way, you have series editor Dr. Jonathan Rose, Swedenborg scholar, knows more about Swedenborg than Swedenborg does, in my humble opinion. And then we have Chelsea Odner on the end here, part of the brains behind Swedenborg and life itself. So thanks everybody for coming. And the thing we're doing today is answering questions. So do you want to do it? Okay. So these are questions. All these questions come from real people in the audience of this program. Some of them were asked over like the previous week. And some are going to be asked live by you guys who are watching right now, but we're probably not going to be able to answer all of them because we get a lot, which is great. So we'll try to get to yours, and if we don't, you can write it as a comment, and we'll try to get to that later. Okay, you guys ready? Okay, Let's do it. Okay, this is question number 1. Redeemer 8888. So Swedenborg says heaven is different based on the love and wisdom within you. So there's the question. Isn't heaven a thing? You go into heaven. Heaven is all the same. What is this differences of heaven? And does Jonathan Rose, does Swedenborg go as far as to say heaven is different for every single person? And why?
He does, in fact. Heaven is very different. And he talks about different communities within heaven that are organized around the things that people love and the way that they understand. And so he says that within different communities, there's even a different light. It's hard for him to describe because...
See our show, what is it called? The Light in the Afterlife, I think it's called. Okay.
Cool.
Continue.
And so this even comes down to every individual, that everybody we are each our own love and our own understanding. And so we all have a slightly different take on reality. And so some people, just as we do in this world psychologically, some people see a warm and wonderful world. Other people see kind of a dark existence or whatever. Yeah. And that continues into the other life.
And some people see a show they really want to watch. Some have already clicked away. You know, it's just weird how that spiritual.
Yeah, so bizarre.
All right, well, anyone have more on that? Okay, because I have a few words. It's almost like that is how we all can contribute to humanity in our own way. Swedenborg says we are our own specific kind of affection. Like we're a way to love that nobody else quite does. And heaven is the joy of each individual sharing with the whole, and the whole sharing with... So you would sort of think, if you got into heaven, if you were that cool, you would think, okay, I hope some more people make it in, but not that many, because if everyone gets in here, then how am I any better than anyone else? But Swedenborg says that angels are actually longing for more people to arrive, because everyone that arrives is a new... It completes the picture. It's not redundant, because we can all offer something different. Mm-hmm. So everybody, don't worry about space. Try to go to heaven. Cool. All right, let's tear through the next one. This is Antoinette on YouTube. Why is it that the physical world cannot exist without the spiritual world? And I would say that's an awesome question, and it sort of holds within it. Why is there a physical world? Everybody goes to the spiritual world, has their near-death experience. Sounds a lot cooler. Why are we slogging through this life here? So what's the answer? I mean, there's got to be a single answer, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, this could probably be answered better than I'm going to, but...
not a chance.
We were sort of just talking about how you need to have... substance and form, and I know that exists in the spiritual world. You need to have substance and form. This sort of like they're two sides.
The great Swedenborgian duality,
right?
Love and wisdom, etc.
And so the spiritual world needs a physical. Like I was just talking about how there's physical images and things that help me get spiritual ideas, and so they really do work as a vessel of these much greater, deeper thoughts that are, I couldn't put into words very well, but I could look at a picture of something and it makes me think of, oh yeah, the Lord is loving and life is going to be okay, or whatever, so there's a value, a usefulness. Now that doesn't get into exactly why, Swedenborg has a lot to say about the physical world being the foundation and the resting place of heaven. So maybe somebody else wants to.
But you started, and I want to say, when you said spiritual world, I remembered once you were recording a segment for the show, and you had to read a Swedenborg quote, and he said spiritual world over and over, and you had to retake that. So I just
Tricky
reminded you of that. Yeah. Okay, so further commentary?
Well, I was just thinking that Swedenborg says the spiritual world is a world of causes, and this world is a world of effects. And so, in a certain way, from Swedenborg's standpoint, to pick a rather maybe humorous animal like a muskrat or something, it is
We're
the
going to
way
get emails about that.
it is the way that it is because of the thing that it embodies. There's a spiritual thing that it embodies,
Yeah.
and that shapes why it behaves the way that it is. Because the spiritual world is a world of causes, so that's why it's needed. It's sort of like the seed around which this physical thing grows. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's the core of what lies within this physical world.
As I read Swedenborg, it's not that there are two people. One person is the spiritual world, one person is the physical world. It's like the physical world is the skin of the spiritual world.
Right.
He talks about it as a foundation. If you saw our episode, why Jesus Christ was born, or why Jesus was born, it says that the equilibrium on earth was thrown off so much that was affecting world of spirits, that everything is in real time affecting everything else, that angels can't be angels hanging out in heaven without us here to interact with, so you couldn't just wipe out the earth. There has to be that. So that's another thought on it, that it's always a progression. It's not like that's the real party and here is just like a waiting room. That their needs here. That's why you don't want to just, God's going to wipe this world out anyway. Nah, I don't think so.
And it's something, there's like, you can find, I don't know the exact place in which book, might be
Secrets of Heaven 9581.
Heaven and Hell or Divine Love and Wisdom, that talks about how the Lord is like the sun in the spiritual world, but how this sun actually is what sort of comes down and has its analog in the physical sun that we have in our solar system, but just sort of, I guess, the existence of light. And but so how that is, it's just interesting. We can think, well, why can't the physical world exist without the spiritual world? But then the spiritual world really can't exist without the physical world. They both go together. But so there's a lot to explore there.
That's how the machine is put together, and we don't understand it. Do you have anything you don't understand about it, Cara?
Everything.
Okay. Cool. All right. We'll get you first on the next one. Okay. Next question is: Drive-by poet. Do heaven and hell have equilibrium only in power and influence, or also in population? I don't know the answer.
No. But
yeah.
Well, the Lord created everybody to go to heaven.
That's what I heard.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And then we get our chances to opt out. But if he created us all to be there, seems like there must be more in numbers.
Right. There can't be that, well, we got 1,800 people in heaven, so now who wants to go to hell? We'll set you up with a sweet package. We really got to even that out. I know that there is an opposition in terms of communities that Swedenborg describes. Every angelic community has an opposite in hell, and so the milder heaven and the milder hell oppose each other. So there's the same number of communities, but that doesn't mean there's the same number of people in each community.
No, that's right. And sometimes Swedenborg says sometimes the Lord has to lift up one community or bring another one down, to get the balance. Like, it's not just a numerical balance. It's like having a smaller kid on one end of a seesaw and then a larger one on the other end. And so you just get them to scooch in until they balance. So the Lord does a lot of scooching.
Because he has to.
Technical term.
He has to be able to imagine a future where he would scooch it so that nobody's on the other side of the seesaw. Because that was the plan, right?
Yeah, like it'll be interesting to run this idea by you guys, because I think about this sometimes where Swedenborg says that it's our sense of self that's at once our opportunity to be an angel in heaven, because that sense of self can be, regenerated and made heavenly, but our sense of self is hell, he even says, like it is from it's the possibility of hell. But in angels, that self, they don't get their sense of self totally obliterated. It's not taken away. They still have a even more enlivened sense of self, but it's just so in surrender and humility to the Lord that the evil that it would always be creating is latent, is sort of dormant, and so in that way, it's almost as if there's a heaven and hell balance, equilibrium going on in every person all the time. Even all these angels in heaven, they almost all each have their own personal hell, and I don't mean that in like a weird way as if like hell exists in heaven, because it doesn't, but just that they have there's some sort of a balance going on there where the Lord's led them in freedom and they've chosen to just turn themselves so completely to the Lord that their own personal hell is dormant, but because the equilibrium is for our freedom.
Yeah.
And so if we've by freedom become angelic, then that's still our personal freedom equilibrium that just requires that hell is very dormant and heaven is very open in us. Does that make sense? So almost like more of a holographic balance.
And it's likened to a spring. I think Swedenborg says this specifically, that it's like a spring where their selfhood is like a weight that drags it down. It would be like something attached to a spring from the ceiling or something, and their selfhood is like a weight that drags it down, and then the force of the spring, which is the Lord's kind of gravitational force, picks it up, and then itself, and they go up and down through different states like this. So they are still in
an equilibrium,
kind of an
between
equilibrium
heaven
between
and hell,
two
between
different
the Lord
forces.
and
Yeah,
self.
that's right. They're just pretty high up and getting higher over time.
Slinky, spiritual slinky.
Yes, exactly.
And
Keeping it real.
that sense of self or independence is actually essential to the human-God connection. That if we didn't have, I was just reading this for an upcoming show, if we didn't have the feeling like we are separate, then we could never form a willing partnership. And also, in researching for another show, it turns out these shows are like pretty useful for me. Anyway, don't say if they're useful for you guys or not. I learned that he says, with a good person, you have evil spirits and angels with the person. With a bad person, there's evil spirits and angels with the person. In the good person, the angels are in control, and the evil spirits are made to serve a use. It's not like they're locked up. When you get to be a master, you actually, evil works constructively for you. Like their negative energy is turned positive. Like vultures scavenging in an ecosystem. That they want to eat this dead stuff. Turns out that actually helps everybody. So those are a couple things I learned from Swedenborg in life.
Right. So less, thinking about it in terms of populations, there is this balance, this equilibrium that's being...
I forgot what our question was.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, those are a few thoughts. Does anyone have anything further? All right, let's do another one. Let's see how many of these questions we can touch on. Yokopo, a lot of NDEs describe the future. You guys made a video on the future. But many say the world may get far worse before it gets better. Is this part of the vastation of the church? Okay, so vastation of the church would be that Swedenborgian term where Swedenborg has these religious epochs that are called churches, where it's not one particular religious organization. It is a mindset for the human race that some percentage of it is participating in that serves a specific function. And Swedenborg says we've had 4 or 5 of these things, and we're headed into a new church. But before every church dies, it has to get what is referenced there as vastated, which all the good stuff pulled out of it, so things get dark. The question is, are we headed for that, or have we already done that, or what? So what's the answer?
I have a thought.
Okay.
If you want.
That's it.
I think we're in it now. I think it's a long, slow process, but I think it is pretty intense right now. It's almost as if the adult supervision somehow got canceled for the human race or something. And even governments, and it's just amazing what's going on in our world right now. And I do think this is part of a religious transformation. The Book of Revelation talks about it in symbolic terms, that it will be very intense. Those first 19, 20 chapters of the Book of Revelation are pretty intense, and then you get happy chapters at the end, 21 and 22. And that's kind of a picture of what we're going through, I think, on a psychological level already. Yeah.
I don't know what it would look like, but is there something you see this division happening where within religious organizations now, you get this, people are getting really extreme and fundamentalist, and then moderate is sort of leaving. And I feel like we in the United States you see this in politics. You get some really extreme like elements that are really divisive. And is that part of the process of something falling apart?
Yeah,
that's my question.
It's interesting to think about, like, is the world going to get far worse before it gets better? And it might just be that we notice how bad we are.
Yeah.
And then we have the opportunity to change. Like, because really, are we, like, kind of hell is hell and evil is evil and it's been around forever. And people are taking plenty of opportunities to, express that. But so, if anything, the world seeming like it's really gone wrong is maybe more of us realizing that even is something that's out of order.
Yeah.
Like to even notice that you've done something horribly wrong is to know that there's another opportunity there. And so that because definitely, I guess, Swedenborg does say in order for an evil to be removed, it has to be seen. It has to come
appear.
out, has to come to the surface. And so that uses the image of cleaning of wounds or whatever. And but so collectively, things have to come to the surface, and then we have to notice them and to be able to, or personally and collectively, I can speak for my own spiritual life, but then
Sure.
I guess we're doing that all together.
Well, it seems like things that used to be commonplace, we now view as horrific.
Definitely,
And that's just... It maybe things seem like they were better, but all this really harmful stuff was going on, and nobody called it what it was.
Yeah. One example, is that just in the last 200 years, people didn't think much of childhood. Like that there was anything about innocence of a child. It was just, they're just mini humans that need to grow up and start working. And so they didn't even have primary schools, preschools. This kind of thing. That's a recent development that you need to even take care of little kids and sort of protect their innocence and help them grow and give them good ideas. That's novel as far as I know from what I've read.
Which is a good deal. I like that. Cara, you have a final thought?
Oh, my only thought is that as we watch the world around us crumbling, it's a great opportunity to look inside and see how that occurs in our own hearts and get our own personal vastation going,
right?
So that we can the trajectory into heaven is working for us.
Okay, you know things by their opposite. Swedenborg says that to really know good, you have to know the opposite.
That's right.
So anything. Actually, next week our show is about why bad things happen. One thing is anything bad that happens illuminates what it is and lets you say, "Oh, I want this." For example, if you were just sick, health means something, and where it doesn't if you've never had to struggle with it.
Yeah.
So, let's do another question. You guys ready? All right. Hopefully you like that, Yokopo. Andre, can we avoid family members that we don't like in the afterlife? Hopefully Andre's mom isn't watching. What's the answer, Cara?
Well, I'm thinking in the long run, probably, but maybe, I don't know. It depends what all the relationships are about. If there's some spiritual issue that you need to work through and it's manifested in a relationship, maybe you'll get a chance to work it out. But it's not like you're going to have to be going to Thanksgiving at the folks that you can't stand for the rest of eternity, because you'll work it out and you'll be in, everyone will be in the society where they're home and where they belong.
Yeah.
And that's a thought. I don't know.
I exactly agree with that based on Swedenborg. There may be some kind of initial meeting. He writes about, we did a show called Unsolved Crimes in the Afterlife, What Happens, because he talks about people who had killed somebody and they coming face to face with that person's spirit in the afterlife, that you can't just, I never want to see them because that would be uncomfortable.
Right.
It could be that if there's something that needs to get worked out. But on the other hand, if you have person that you had any kind of relationship with that's really, this is a harmful thing, you're not forced to be in proximity to that person in the same way just because of external bonds here. Even family bonds only become spiritual if there's love. There's a physical bond initially, but love is what brings, and that spiritual families are based on having, you meet people and you feel like this is my family because we love the same way. So those are thoughts.
And Swedenborg talks about the fact that I think that's right. There probably will be some contact if it's beneficial for the two of you or whatever. But he talks about the fact that when two people disagree, when they have different thoughts or different feelings or whatever, they turn away from each other and then they just disappear. You don't even see the person anymore. And so I think we're not going to be just saddled endlessly, as you others have been saying, with people where you just see things completely differently. You get. We talk in this world about opposites attract. To Swedenborg, it's likes, it's similarities that attract and that bring people together.
I like thinking about that too in terms of thoughts, because as Swedenborg describes it, our thought patterns are basically a byproduct of our location in the spiritual world. We're actually getting, input from spiritual communities, and that's shaping sort of our thought stream. Wouldn't it be nice to not have to be around thoughts you don't want to be around? Because pretty much everyone I know is annoyed at their thought stream at the very least. So that the idea of
that family,
that family, like the within the like the what's that movie that Pixar just did, Inside Out?
Inside Out,
I didn't see it, but that, like, if you don't like those little guys, wouldn't that be cool to not have to be around them? Chelsea, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting to do the thought experiment of like, what would that be like in the spiritual world? And it's hard to imagine for us here, I think. And I remember hearing from somebody talk about how ideas can change a lot easier and faster than like our love can change. Like that takes some process to like change our will. And so things might seem slower in that regard if we've developed these super strong attachments to these people, even if they're not like core, resonant with us or something. But it speaks to me of just how important it is for us to start the process now. Like having reflection on your own thoughts, on your own sense of who am I, in the Lord, and what, who, I don't know, like what kind of people do I want to surround myself with, or that whole process of, because I was thinking in terms of what you're saying about thoughts, like we can get sort of addicted to thoughts that we have. And so there are these super strong attachments, and Swedenborg says we're going to continue to have those if that's just what we've made our life out of, is always thinking or longing and willing for the same things. But so just to sort of shine a light on what am I attaching myself to in this world and why, and is that really what feels like it's an integrity with, myself or something in the Lord, or so that's an idea where we can sort of start that process I guess.
We bring the life with us that we had, or he phrases it a couple different ways.
And if you enjoy, unfortunately, if you're having an enjoyable hatred with someone else, they're enjoying hating you, and you enjoy hating them.
Like you and I.
That is more of a bond. I mean that can bring people together, because it might not be love, but it's still that you are enjoying having this rivalry or resentment or something.
Well, in hell, there is an attractive force as well. I mean, there are communities in hell, and people are brought together there, but it's more of like an organized crime kind of thing. Like, okay, you're my friend right now, but if you double cross me, I'm going to kill you. Or right now, I'm going to try to get good with you because you're more powerful, but as soon as I have a chance, I'm going to betray you. So there's sort of that, the other side of attraction as well.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that because people often ask, like, oh, well, why can't I just, hey, if I'll just get purified in the spiritual world and then I can just go to heaven, great. Like, but that's sort of the reality of, people ask, like, is hell real? Like, the reality of hell is our own wills just getting really attached to things that really don't actually serve us. And so, but if we don't sort of start the process of wanting to think about, is there another way to organize myself, or pay attention to certain things over other things, that is valuable to do that.
Do it
this time.
Do it right now.
Yeah.
That's the message. Okay.
That's right.
Let's take a look. Another one. Loops John. How did God come upon the wisdom to deem what is necessary? Like, how did he get set up to be the dude, So, I don't know. Swedenborg sort of takes that for granted because God hasn't come upon the wisdom. God is wisdom.
Exactly.
God is divine living. Well, if you say exactly, elaborate on that.
Well, actually, it's little known that there was a raffle early on, and he won the raffle. No,
he bought most of the tickets.
No, it does kind of make you dizzy to think about, because I mean, I've thought about that before. Like, how did we get so fortunate that the Creator just happens to be perfect love and perfect wisdom? And that was lucky. Like,
Right.
it could have worked out worse than that.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that God is that wisdom. So it wasn't an acquiring. You know, the Bible speaks about God being the same yesterday, today, and forever. There wasn't an acquisition.
We think
going
about
on.
asking that question: how did wisdom come upon the wisdom to deem what is necessary? You know, of course, it's because it already is that. It speaks to, we think of God. God is some kind of empty person, and within God, assign the characteristics of all-present love, all-present wisdom. No, God is those things, and so the love we are experiencing God flowing in. There's a lot of that in Swedenborg, you know, and that's an essential concept. If you're trying to get a grasp of God, God is not a being that has these attributes. God's being is those attributes. So,
Right. And wisdom is what perfect love needs to know in order to get the job done. You know, it's the love that leads to the wisdom.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Right. And I
go
guess just that how did God come upon the wisdom to deem what is necessary is through omnipresence. You know, that's just what it brings to mind, that like God actually is everywhere all the time through the divine design, as he said, or you can check out the show What God Can't Do, and that
Yeah. Let's see how many shows we can plug.
This is good.
Commercial.
But so somehow God is so present that, and with complete wisdom and complete love, that it's just like the best sort of ally that you could imagine, always sort of working on your team and being right there to try to like help and support you as best as it can.
It almost seems like total love is an automatic byproduct of total wisdom, meaning the things that aren't loving, where one of you could be sitting here and accidentally fall over during the show, and I could be like, that's funny, and think that was cool, is because I don't understand that you are a person just like me and what that feels like, you know. But when you're everywhere at once, the only thing that makes sense is, it's not, you know, anybody else's suffering is not, you know, you can have a tendency to like, like a tornado is coming. As long as it doesn't hit my house, it's kind of exciting, you know. But I remember when a hurricane came and I was watching the trees waving by my house. I was like, okay, as long as these ones don't fall, it's fine. And I was like, wait a second, everyone else is hoping that my trees fall and that theirs don't. Anyway, those are some thoughts, Carter. You have anything? Okay.
It's really awesome that it's awesome to contemplate that God knows how the steps, and for every different kind of person, because all people are different, and yet God knows how. No, I know how someone like you, you know, I know the next step for you.
Yeah.
I know how this development needs to go, and all that, if you're willing to come along for the ride.
So that's the story of how God came upon the wisdom.
Yes.
Deem what's necessary.
New folklore.
All right, so let's take a look at another question. Lisa, if the universe is fully inhabited, then did Jesus only incarnate on Earth? Yes, you have this phenomenon where Swedenborg, if you just saw our last show, which was called Why Jesus Was Born, Swedenborg is talking about all this mystical stuff, spirits and everything, but he also says Jesus is real, and Jesus was the thing, you know, is like the central important thing. So we got to unpack that phenomenon a little bit. How does that make sense? What is there Jesus on every planet? We know now that there are multiple planets. I just watched a movie called The Martian, so I know there's Mars. Was there Jesus on Mars? Why didn't he go there? Just because there's no people? Are there people on other planets? Why isn't there Jesus there? So what's the answer?
Well, one interesting thing that Swedenborg says is that Jesus was born on there because we have the printed word, and we can spread the knowledge.
Yep.
So interesting.
And in his experiences of visiting spirits from other planets, they seem to be all about Jesus too, but like we needed him born here, and they didn't. Or something. I don't know.
Right.
Do you have...
Well, there's another factor that he also says is that I have the impression that that Jesus was born here because our planet is the worst, and he wanted to go to the
The
farthest. If you got to the farthest away thing from heaven, then you have everything in between, no problem,
Yeah.
And Swedenborg does talk about people on other planets who are evil and others who are good, but it sounds like overall we win, we rock around here, we won
Yeah.
the evil battle, and so that's why we got the blessing of having the Lord born here, and that makes some sense to me. It's kind of mind-boggling to think about that, but that these more spiritual cultures that are on other planets are more intuitive and in touch with heaven, and so they get the information, they get the update, But we needed something concrete and something written that we could have in our hands.
Yeah.
Well, that's like Jesus was the physical embodiment of the divine human. And so before the physical embodiment of Jesus, there was the divine human who is the Lord. And so then Jesus was glorified into that divine human. So there is the divine human that then had this physical image and embodiment
Anchor.
as Jesus, right? And so the idea that if the whole universe is inhabited with people, they were able to have a relationship with the divine human, even without Jesus, the physical experience of Jesus on their planet. But so interesting that you mentioned the printed word thing, because I've heard about how like we used to be an oral culture, oral society group of people, and Swedenborg says that sort of we're the worst in terms of we got the most externally oriented. Like we turned the most away from spiritual things than other inhabited planets did, I guess. And so, but we can see like needing to read something, to learn about something is a very external thing to have to do. Like you can't think about your own thoughts. You need to look it up in a book and read it on this physical piece of paper. Like we're so dependent on physical external things, that's sort of an evidence of how externally oriented we are, but that was a development of humanity over time, that we lost our ability to just hold things in our memory, to just learn everything orally. We ended up getting to the point of writing it down, but then that also, I think that was a process of us getting more and more external, and then that also was what led to the Lord needing to come here to this most external place.
And the upside is that when you have written word, you can have some recorded and it stays just as it is. And Swedenborg says that's part of that. We've done a couple of shows about the importance of the text of the Old and New Testaments, and because there could be this text that could hold this kind of this, you were talking before about heaven and how heaven needs earth. Swedenborg actually says that when we read the text here, in heaven, different things happen. But we need to, that we're thinking about these names and places. Heaven is thinking about states and phenomena, spiritual phenomena. So somehow God is turning that. Hey, yeah, we were really bad. We really needed that, but works out really well for everybody because he came across in that raffle.
Well,
the ability to do that.
Well,
That's right.
The Lord's divine providence of being able to see that that's what would be the most useful. He becomes the first and the last. Wanting to be everywhere.
And
Cool.
and that means that it's universal in the spiritual world, like in the spiritual world, which is a very important place too. There's universal knowledge about the Lord's birth, and that only needed to happen physically once. And you take a cucumber, turn it into a pickle. You only have to do that once, and it's not a reversible procedure.
Yeah.
And the Lord, that's very profane to liken
That's the most
glorification to
awe-inspiring metaphor.
making a pickle. Thank you. But that only needed to happen once. He's not going to go to different planets and do that on the different planets.
To get most present in most outermost things.
And they have dreams, they have vision. They have more spiritual ways
Yeah.
of connecting with the information.
Can read correspondences, can know what a mountain means, what a tree
Right,
means.
more connected with heaven and whatever. So
So that's the answer, Lisa, or a few of the answers. So hopefully you enjoyed
Good-
that. Let's
good
take a
question.
look at our great question. Let's look at the next one. Ash Mayberry, does the heaven Swedenborg talk about only include humans? What about animals and other life forms that may have evolved in other parts of the galaxy or universe? Well, Swedenborg does this funny thing where he says heaven is from the human race, but then he talks about other planets, and there's people on those planets, but he calls them human as well, right? So,
He does.
So what's going on with that? Are they people from this world that went there? The answer is no. It's not a biological thing, as far as I can tell. And he will describe people who, they're spirits that used to live on other planets, and that they even have different physical characteristics. Probably wouldn't be genetically the same species, but he calls them human. And he says that these people are human, which makes me wonder: are chimpanzees human in that sense? You know, like, do they? You know, you ever see that show about like Coco, the chimpanzee? It can do so many signs, like it has a more complex vocabulary than a whatever-year-old human being. Are there more? So Swedenborg, a lot of traditions don't, but Swedenborg draws this clear distinction between humans who have free will and animals who are their will and their understanding are joined. They just are what they are.
Right.
You know, as we said before, you don't get, if a bear attacks somebody, you're not like, what a monster, what an evil bear. You know, just like that, you were in this territory, that's just what bears do. But if a person attacks, you think you should have done something different. So, but do you see what I'm saying? Are there more than one species that have free will? According to Swedenborg. So those are my
I
questions.
guess the way I would frame it is that the what Swedenborg calls human is really about having love and compassion in your heart. Not that animals don't have that, but also having a choice about whether you love or you don't, or being able to choose your values, being able to choose, like chart a course with your mind. You know, squirrels don't get together and all decide, you know, why do we run up the trees? Why do we do this? They don't have squirrel philosophers who sit around and go, you know, we're nuts. You know, frankly, we really are. And thank you. But but humans do that kind of thing. And so what makes us human is not the plumbing, or it's not, you know, not the opposable thumbs.
Right.
It's the fact of being this multi-layered being that has a will and an intellect and some sort of external package. So I imagine the package is a little different with people on other planets, but what makes them human is that they have those features, and that would be recognizable to us as human.
Makes sense?
Yeah, just the idea of other life forms. So I guess you're saying, like, if there are human-like life forms on other planets, then yes, those people are in the spiritual world, but Swedenborg does call them human. But then in terms of the spiritual world does have even more variety in terms of, like, the diversity of life and plants and trees and species and all that stuff, Swedenborg says.
Everything we have here and more.
And more.
Including animals.
And that they're all images of love and wisdom. And am I on the right track here?
Yeah.
Just that they're a reflection of the loves and ideas that these humans, however broadly you define that, have.
Yeah. So the answer is there are turtles in heaven. Like, you can go see them. They're there.
They mean something different, maybe, or
Well, Who knows? Because I love studying biology. I was going to do conservation biology. I love that stuff. So I want to know, how does the ecosystem work there? There's got to be order to it. The way Swedenborg describes it is kind of all over the place, things appearing and disappearing. There's got to be a similar order to it. There's got to be something as exciting as, there's only 18 breeding pairs of this animal left. We have to save habitat for them. We have to figure out how you can have it so people can enjoy this so there's got to be some analog to that. And we'll find out when we get there. So I think we should move to the next one. There you go, Ash. Robin, I finished Secrets of Heaven and was curious about the part where he describes the different hells that people experience. Some were under the foot, and some were, put the kids in another room, under the buttocks, and so on. What body was he talking about? Yeah, that's like the most awesome question. Because if you get into particularly Swedenborg's Journal of Spiritual Experiences, what is he talking? These were a little above the right eye, down to the left. These appeared just above the sternum. What is that? Do you guys
They're
know?
nodding their heads a
What?
lot.
Go ahead. Say something.
I wanna know what they have to
Kara's
say.
going to answer this one.
No,
I'm very excited.
All I know is that Swedenborg says that.
A disclaimer. All we all know is that Swedenborg said.
Right.
Thing X.
Is that heaven is in the human form, just, and we've talked about that many times on this
Sure.
show.
Yes, we have.
And that hell has an analogous thing going on of a human form.
The great monster.
And so we've talked about how there's people that are eye spirits or kidney spirits or skin spirits. Right. And I think that's what he's talking about when he's describing that these spirits were a little left of my right ear or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is confusing because he does talk about, he seems to be referring to his own body sometimes.
Right.
And so I don't really know.
There are multiple human forms, as far as I can tell, when he describes. He describes the grand human, like you were talking about, but then he also described that every spirit has a place in the grand human, and you don't move from your place. You can appear like you're in somewhere else, but it's like wherever you're facing, it's always in the same place because it's 360 degrees, doesn't matter. It's all like right and left. Like you're always where you are. In terms of how the Lord is looking, like certain spirits appear in different, because God is kind of the center of reality, so different spirits appear in different areas there. But then also there are spirits who interact with Swedenborg's body in particular ways. Like if devious, I was just reading about how demons would try to attach to the back of the head. Spirits who have to do with the xiphoid cartilage are like false, are superficial and false. So they both live in that part of the body, but also interact with your body when they come to you. And you can tell by how they affect your body what they're like. That's my sense so far from reading. Does anyone want to pick a fight on that?
Yeah, I have had a similar thought. I've had very much the same question that this person poses for years reading Swedenborg, like, which body, what are you talking, what kidney, the kidney, what kidney, what are you talking about?
Send this draft back.
They're back in the 1800s. There was a hilarious ad on TV where someone was at the manicurist, and they have their hand dipped in some stuff, and they're soaking in it. And then they're talking about this new dish liquid that's really kind to your hands. It wasn't really the 1800s, but and then the Madge says, "You're soaking in it." You're what? And they pull their hand out of the. So shocking to think that at the manicurist you're soaking your hands in dish soap. And
sounds like a great commercial.
We're soaking in it. We're wearing the image and likeness of God. It's a fascinating thought that we know what this thing is because we're wearing it. We all have that's something that unites us. We all have the same experience. And so I think Swedenborg was probably feeling it in his body, but knew that it was a reflection of the grander body. It's like, oh yeah, this affects the ribs. And it's not just like my ribs, it's like everybody's got ribs, the ribs, the kidney, and and so everything's kind of mapped on that. And so I think it had to have some sensory experience for him as part of how he knew where this was coming from. This caused a pain in my eye or the temple.
Swedenborg talks about how we all know the language of heaven. Like we all come into knowledge of that language, that there's one language, and that that we all have that somehow inside of us. And it makes me think of how you had Raymond Moody talking at that event, and he was talking about nonsense and how when people have spiritual experiences or they're in heaven, sort of what they describe of it can sometimes be nonsensical, but that there's sort of a wisdom or some kind of order maybe within this nonsense. And this sounds a little bit like nonsense to me. Like it's sort of like, wait, how can you say that thing is under your left foot and this one's under whatever? And but that's part of this language of heaven that we like. The language of heaven is all about this human body that we have, or that somehow the Lord set it up so that this human body that we have can be a kind of way to figure out have some cool spiritual insights about spiritual life. And so talking about, because sometimes I think Swedenborg is saying within the grand human there's are these societies that correspond to these different parts of the body, but then other times he uses specific parts of the body to mean somewhat different things. Like, for example, like the pelvic area is sort of the, a very inmost heaven, sort of reproduction, just a very sort of like sacred good part of it. And yet at the same time, when you think about the human body in another way, it's pretty low down on the scale. Like Swedenborg prioritizes like, oh, the head is the height, and then once you get down to those hip bones and the knee bones, you're sort of way lower on the scale. So like, wait, that doesn't compute with what you just said was so important and, precious about this part of the body or something. So it's like it can seem contradictory, but I think it's a kind of language. And so as far as like, he often talks about underneath the foot being, outside of
that's right.
heaven, really low, really like the foot is the closest thing to the earth, so really external. So you just like thinking about it in terms of correspondences. And one other little thought was just this idea that the Lord is the human, the grand man, right? And that the Lord knows what's working in the divine design through the divine design, because he is that order that's everywhere. But that Swedenborg says that he knows what's working against that divine design, or that's how he knows what's not in order, is because it's always working against the divine design. And so it's cool to think about, if the Lord is this like grand human body, then hell is always working against that human body. It's never really so far, like it's always somewhere right there, like right underneath your foot, or really bugging that itch in your whatever. I don't know.
I have this anticipation of how cool I'm gonna think it is when I understand it. Like I can see shades of, oh, this is gonna be ingenious. That somehow God is designing this experience where we all go through life, but at the same time, we all are immersed in the pattern of all of life. That you have this app in your pocket that has the entire everything within it already, and that everything is a metaphor for everything on every scale. That you have heaven and hell on this huge scale in the body and below the foot and trying to hurt the body, and you've all lived that with germs trying to get into your body and disease trying to get in. And is that the way God experiences everything? Is he can feel this particular evil that's messing with the human race is like as a pain in the neck, or something like that.
Right.
So I think stay tuned, because I think when we see it, we're gonna say he's good. Like God is like smart. That was a smart way to set it up. That's what I'm gonna say, and hopefully God will show me divine favor for having that optimism. All right, let's do the next one. Great question.
Yes.
Renan, did Swedenborg say anything about the polytheistic gods? Are they just silly superstitions, or could they be true spiritual beings? Who are the gods? Does anybody else want to? I always like monopolize the low hanging fruit, so I'll let somebody else start.
I'd love to take a swing, but I don't know.
Please do.
Swedenborg says this amazing thing that it's very. A lot of people say that God is one, but Swedenborg says that there are an infinite things that are present in God. Like he's not just one blob, a blancmange or something. He's, an amazing. All different kinds of things are together in God. So God, he speaks sometimes about the divine nemesis. There's this tremendous mercy. There, all the different qualities that are reflected in human beings are present there in God, and many more. And so my understanding of how polytheism came about was that people started out just adoring, look at that divine strength, and someone else just admires the beauty of God, and someone else admires the softness and the mercy and the kindness or the patience or something like that. And then those got kind of extrapolated. They thought a lot about those personalities, what they would be like. They even sort of created works of fiction where they're talking to each other and so on. And then over time there was some confusion about it, and they got concretized into these ideas that you have all these different gods. But I think they're actually different qualities within the vastness of the one God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Okay.
Is it? Did you want to say something first?
I have a thought. I don't have to say something first.
Please do it.
Okay. Well, I have two thoughts actually.
Two thoughts? I gave you time for one thought.
Well, one as far as like, I don't know what polytheistic gods this person is specifically asking about, but my mind immediately goes to,
Hindu.
Yeah, Hindu, the polytheism, and so for example, just one very interesting example that has stayed with me since I read it, but in the Bhagavad Gita, there's one point where Krishna, who is this one God, you might think one in the million, but in this case, being an image of the one God, but he's talking to Arjuna, and Arjuna says, I want to see you in your greatness, like in your cosmic allness or whatever. And then Krishna like transforms or transmute into that for a moment for Arjuna, and it's, I don't know how many verses it is in the Bhagavad Gita that just describes this sort of all faces and all, trying to see all of the infinity of God in one picture. Like, we just can't do it. But sort of it's this, as if Krishna had sort of transformed into all of it. But then he comes back and is just Krishna talking to Arjuna. And that's just such a powerful idea of like, Swedenborg just so emphasizes that there's one God, and, in this, Jesus is the human form of that God. And then, but that, like, we need that to connect to. And, but that one human is really just all of it, infinite love, infinite wisdom. And I think that, like, reality, that there's that sort of dichotomy is just like, humanity has been sort of trying to get a handle on that forever. So it's just so normal that we just think, of course, there's a lot of them, or like, but that over time, humanity is just trying to think of God as human, and then you just come up with all these different very
manifestations,
human gods or whatever. But that's my turn. I'll leave it
Cool.
at that for now.
Very good. Cara, do you want to turn? All right, I'm taking yours then. All right. So I think one reason why I think Swedenborg might really be onto something, like, is this guy actually been shown a good segment of how reality really is that the tale that he tells of human history does not trivialize other spiritual traditions. You have certain religious sects that, even within Christianity, some like Jesus is it, everything else is just a bunch of crap, Swedenborg talks about hieroglyphics and how those were based on correspondences. He talks about the Greek god. When I hear polytheistic, I think about Greek and Roman gods, and that those actually were based on correspondences. I heard, and I don't know how I would have heard this, that there was a correspondence with Zeus and Hera. Is that the Zeus's wife is named Hera? And Zeus would go off and sleep with other people. And it was like, oh, why are you doing this? But the correspondence is that Hera was the church, but Zeus was God, and God was going to be with people, all people, not just people within the church. All religion, that God could be present with all, but the people in the church, wait, just us. So that is a possibility, and I think that it's not just that this other stuff. Think of like Native American religion, that this was all just that is the truth seeping through in those ways. And so there's something, and that Swedenborg talks about idols, images, that those can be positive or negative. It's if you have images that are reminding you of divine things, that's great. When people separate those and worship the physical object, then it's bad. I would think the polytheistic stuff, you could have a very true connection to God. But if you really think that there are sort of warring personalities, that you're just not going to get that same kind of it's all love connection. So those are a couple of those. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to belabor this even further.
Sure.
Jesus does, it's interesting to be a Christian, and, Jesus is sort of the spokesperson of Christianity.
He's up there.
He's up
in
there.
Christianity.
But he is having a conversation with a woman at the well, and they're talking about different religions, and Jesus says that sort of his point is that the Father, or sort of divine love, as we understand through Swedenborg, is wanting to be worshipped in spirit and truth, and that's sort of like the emphasis. And I think Christianity falls away from even what Jesus was really trying to say by being so person of Jesus focused, that we just create a lot of strife with a whole lot of other people, when Jesus' own words, this whole emphasis on like, I want worship in spirit and truth, not just these oh, it's only important for you to worship at Jerusalem, and it's not okay if you worship over here, and it's blah, blah, blah. But just that, like what you're just getting at is like the spirit and truth of it. Like that there is this love and there's this wisdom that has just been wanting to have a door in this world forever, and it's always trying, and we're always trying to connect in different ways. But then,
There you go.
And I think when we go to the spiritual world, we might encounter angels who really we might be so astounded by them because they embody these qualities.
Right.
But then they'll just say, "Oh, it's not me."
Right.
The Lord is so kind that He wants to give everything of Himself and give different qualities to different people at different times and to do different sort of useful things. And they would be totally humble about it. Oh no, I'm dirt. I'm nothing. But the Lord does flow through me sometimes, and I really like that. And so I think we'd encounter people who we would feel like, gosh, you're like a demigod. You're amazing.
Right.
And they say, well, I'm an angel, and that's the Spirit of the Lord that you're feeling there.
To close, he does say that sometimes angels forget that they're not God.
Yes.
That God is flowing through them so much that they think they are God talking. So maybe we'll get to feel that at some point someday. All right, great. Thanks very much. Let's do the next one. T-Lock. I've been searching for a spiritual awakening. What can I do to do so? What do you got? What should we do? I mean, if people want to wake up spiritually, what's the Swedenborgian advice? Reformation, regeneration, repentance,
Right.
those kinds of
That's a
things.
good start.
Okay.
I love or do you want to say something? Yeah. Okay. There is a book that's by Ray and Star Silverman called Rise Above It, and it's just the 10 Commandments made very accessible and applicable to your life. And just that, Swedenborg says that if we take one thing and start working on it in ourselves, in our life, start reflecting about some heavenly ideal and thinking about that in terms of where we are in our lives, and we start making some focus on that, then that's just sort of like enough. That's enough of a catalyst that because the Lord is so present, so wanting to just, bring us all to heaven if He can, that's just can start the process of a spiritual awakening. But so in terms of for me, I remember reading that book and just taking, one of the commandments and thinking, how am I living this in? How could I sort of do this more consciously, and how could I not be sabotaging my own process to do this more consciously? And I feel like for me that was something that really created sort of a spiritual awakening.
And I want to alter the question to fit that in. So what has it been for you guys that have been little spiritual awakenings? It doesn't have to be the mountaintop thing, but what has worked? What's something that's worked for you? And I'll go to let you think about that. But to me, the Swedenborg awakening comes through normal stuff. It comes when I'm doing the dishes, but I'm thinking about I'm doing this for the common good. It feels different, that there is a spiritual feeling in that. It comes when I'm interacting with my own thoughts and feelings, but I'm doing so from this matrix of truth where I'm thinking about this, I'm not thinking about that. I'm the one who chooses which is legit, which is not from that. From these things that I've learned, or I'm looking at something in nature and imagining the symbolism, and then it feels different. That starts to feel different. To me, it's all. Swedenborg says it's not apart from the world; it's in the world. That you have in living. He kept living a normal life, even though he was having all. I don't have journeys like he does, but it seems like to me that you keep doing similar things, but you do them for a different reason, or you do them, you have a different experience. That's what's worked for me in my little ways. But I mean, I wouldn't say I've had some profound spiritual awakening. That I had this one experience and now I think differently. So in a way, I'm not qualified to answer the question because I don't know how to get there. But those are the things that have felt like little spiritual awakenings to me. So that's what I have to say. Yep.
Yeah, along those lines, I would say that take other people into consideration and not just
Right.
be wallowing in my own what I want and what I think is the way it should be,
Right.
is a little tiny step of a spiritual awakening. Like, oh, there's people out there who could be
There
I
are,
could be
yeah.
serving, or I could be helping, and maybe I could just try a little love instead of like foaming away with contempt or something like that.
That's advanced.
Yeah, it's very advanced. Yeah.
I can see in theory how that could
But I mean, if he's talking, or if T-Lock is
yeah.
talking about some kind of spiritual experiences like Swedenborg had, I don't know. Some people seem to have the gift of spiritual experiences, and some people just don't have that kind of thing going on. But,
Right.
so it depends how you're defining the term. But
Yeah, well, he doesn't give, as we always say, he spends so much time writing, but doesn't ever lay out, here's how you have a spiritual experience.
Yeah, right.
Even though everything he writes is based on it, he's telling you all his spiritual experience, but he never says, this is how you do it. So, yeah, it must not, he must not be thinking that's what's important. So,
yeah.
Jonathan.
I guess my answer would be that I think for me it started with prayer and praying, just praying for some kind of an awakening, praying for a difference in my life. One of the things that came to me out of the result of prayer was the need to change certain things, certain behavior, just bad habits. And so I started working on those. So part of what came to me, things that I had to get out of the way in order to make room for there was something in there now.
Yeah.
For a while I thought, well, maybe I can't have that kind of experience, or maybe I can't, whatever. But then, no, it's a matter of there's something's blocking. So getting certain behavior, working on not doing certain things seemed to be important. So prayer and not doing, and then eventually also getting into the lofty state that Cara described, where becoming more loving or thinking more about other people, like being useful, those kind of things.
Right.
And to my mind, you can have moments of sort of aha or being lifted up and stuff like that. A lot of it to me is just a daily incremental, just a little change over time where you start to realize, wow, my thoughts are different than they used to be. As you were saying before, you think based on where you are in the spiritual world and realize, oh, I think I have a different view. And, working away in this way.
And I really drift in and out of it. There are times when, particularly the principles that I've picked up in Swedenborg, these are vivid. This stuff works. I can feel the I can feel the reality of it. I can feel this lifting me above negative states. And then I'll just go very external, and I won't even, I know that there is that state, but it's like, I turn the key, try to get back in, but now I'm just like, well, when the sun comes out, it will. But very much, maybe we go through this miniature form of exinanition, glorification, like Jesus did. Of we're plugged in, we're unplugged. So, all right, believe it or not, we're like out of time. We're gonna do one more, just so that we finish on an even number. Just kidding, I haven't been counting the questions, but we're gonna do one. That there were books not included in the Bible, aka lost books of the Bible. Dr. JSR, you know some things about the Bible. Would you tell us the answer to this question?
Well, it's interesting in some ways. People might say that he's gone in the opposite direction, that he to some extent says that there are things in there that aren't as... The Catholic Bible is actually larger than the Protestant Bible. Some things over time were removed from the Protestant Bible, or they were considered apocryphal, and they used to be printed as part of the Bible, and then later on they weren't included. So a New King James or something won't have Maccabees or Tobit or things like that in there. And Swedenborg gives a list of correspondential things in there, and then there's sort of a second tier of material. Lots of people, Judaism has broken the Bible into three parts, even just the Hebrew scriptures into three parts, and the Torah is more important,
Right.
than the prophets and the writings and so on. So people do this kind of thing. So he does a priority within things like Genesis, Exodus, Isaiah, the book of Revelation. You really didn't need anything outside of that. So he doesn't talk about lost books of the Bible. In one passage, he talks about epistles of Paul that are not known in this world that were discovered in the spiritual world. So just an interesting little,
There you go.
interesting little comment. He doesn't seem that keyed up about it. I think he really felt that if you really dwelt on what was there, and once it opens up, you see a whole world inside of what's there. There's nothing wrong with, if you can read it in an internal way. I know there's all sorts of crazy stuff on the outside of the Old and New Testaments, but if you can break through to that deeper level.
Same time, though, Swedenborg has talked about, he makes reference to the ancient word, that there was a word that existed before our 2.0 version or something, like that actually what we're working with is just sort of like the word for humanity right now, and that there was an ancient word that we don't have anymore, or that there might be remnants of around the world or something. And but then he also talks about how it's actually written by angels there who are inspired by the Lord, to write it. So it's specific to their heaven, to their community. And so I think in terms of the books not included or the Bible, but it's just a very interesting thing to be talking about the word and what are these books and what's their purpose and what's
the ancient word. He talks about the Wars of Jehovah being a book of the ancient word. If any of you want to find that, go to Greater Tartary.
That's right.
You'll find it. So that's a Swedenborg joke.
Send us a postcard.
Right.
Swedenborg says in Greater Tartary, which is an old school term for Asia, the top of Asia, he says it still exists there.
China,
so is it the Tibetan Book of the Dead? I don't know. So much. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. There's our graphics. Nice to see those there. That helps this video get out into the world. Also, if you want to donate, you can, and that supports the programming here. It's never too early to start your tax deductible stuff for 2016.
2017.
So hopefully you'll think of us, and thanks. And we're going to be back next week talking about why